Okay, has anyone gotten the time to read a bit on like John Dewey and like his work? Or he actually says like his kind of paradigm really resonates with ours. Like he just wants the education system to be less like kind of he doesn't say technological, but everything he's saying attributes to being like education system being less permeated by technological uh, characteristics and attributes, not necessarily technology, but that like the stringent kind of standardized testing, that kind of rote learning where it entails memorization and feeding information back to the professor in a way that he's the one who interpreted it for you. So we're going kind of around in circles. So he was just very against that kind of mechanic. He actually says mechanic way of like learning. So it's kind of interesting how he like we can kind of relate it to like anti-tech in a way, because he doesn't explicitly say technology, but he's like implicitly saying it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, we can just start, and then I post some questions in the document. So whenever we want to like stop and just get a conversation then going, then we'll do that. It's actually pretty short, so we can get through it in like 15 minutes, and then we can have the rest of the time to talk.
Cool.
So. Okay, awesome. So first of all, John Dewey was utterly against passive learning. That is indeed endured in most classrooms around the world. Rather, he had quite a unique approach to learning and enlightenment. That said, Dewey thought that rote learning, which is basically memorizing and reinforcing facts, was the antagonist, coupled with the fact that there's a predetermined curriculum to follow, didn't make the case for rote learning any better. So he kind of just didn't like that whole just memorize this and go to the test, and you have to kind of spit out what you kind of swallowed with little to no interpretation of your own. Like, so he was kind of against that way of learning. So Dewey's theory of progressive education is often misunderstood and misinterpreted as a completely hands-off approach. However, what Dewey meant okay. However, what Dewey meant to say was that the traditional subject matter was in fact important, although would be digested better by students if it was integrated and meshed with the strengths of that given person. So he goes on to say that we want to somewhat tap into that emotional side of students and kind of integrate that subject matter with a way that they can resonate with the facts using some of their interests as well. Because if you just give them a subject to learn without any kind of common ground between it and the student, it's not going to stick well. They're not going to digest it well. So we believe that there should be like an integrated approach to learning and not only focusing just solely on kind of reverberating what the subject matter entails, but kind of meshing it in a way that piques the interest of students. So that was his kind of approach to things. So to give you some background information on the retrograde structure that Dewey was in pursuit to debunk, which is the reflex arc model, it was a host basically to mechanical learning, which encompassed standardized tests as a measure of intellect, utterly elbowing out experience and emotion in learning. At last, we can draw a potent comparison here with the education system being completely played by technology and technique, because they were kind of eliciting mechanical learning. That's basically what he's trying to say. So I have a question for you guys that can stir up some discussions. So what are your opinions on standardized testing, and do you believe that they do indeed emanate characteristics of the industrial technological society, where they urge us to memorize and compute information rather than experience and reflect? Which this is my part, which in turn makes us more machine-like than human. So what do you guys think of that?
I guess I'll start. I was thinking about this recently. I was talking to that guy Mitchell that wanted to like talk to some of us in the group, and he was asking me about just like the educational system and academia,
Yeah,
how
he
it
asked me
exists
that
today.
question too. Yeah, it was a good
Yeah.
question.
Okay, so cool. You talked to him too. Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to him too.
Yeah, it's definitely like a lot of the issues that I kind of ended up pointing to was the fact that like we have so many people. And so like the task that is handed to these educators today, especially in the West and especially in higher forms of learning, like in college level, it's your tests, well, I mean, I guess especially so in high school and stuff too, but there's so many people in like a certain room, so you're teaching like 40 people the same thing,
Mhm.
and not
Mhm.
all those people learn everything in the same
Yeah.
way. Some people are more visual, some people are I learned that there are some people that think almost in 3D, that people with dyslexia, um, they have almost like 3D thinking patterns. So they think in terms of shapes and forms like that. And so that's why that's what contributes to their dyslexia, is because like
Mhm.
their thoughts are literally being spun like in a three-dimensional space. And I'm like, that's
Ooh,
interesting.
yeah.
So like, yeah, there are all these different ways that a person can learn. And so if a teacher basically has like two options. It's either teach a certain way, which might be the best way, but you're only going to reach a certain low percentage of the students that you're actually talking to, or you dumb down the material and simplify it to the point
Yeah.
that they're really not doing much learning to begin with, but everybody is on the same page. And I feel
Mm.
like that's kind of what happens a lot is um, the lessons get dumbed down and simplified in order to accommodate these
Yeah.
struggles with teaching multiple people at once. If you are in a one-on-one interaction, that's like when where true learning happens, because you can like actually tailor the teachings to the individual,
Yes.
and they can you can go at the pace that they're comfortable at. You can assess their progress at any given time, and there might be, and so like standardized testing is, I think, one of these tools that is used to try to educate a mass amount of people. How do you
Yeah.
assess whether all of these people know what they're knowing? The real best way would be to be one by one, sit down with them and like
Mhm. Mhm.
ask them questions and have a conversation with them and try to gauge where their understanding is at. But that's just infeasible in terms of like
Yeah.
we get all these people graduated by May. So like we give this big fat test, we simplify all the learning down so it can be quantified rather than
Mhm. Mhm.
qualified.
Mhm.
You know, there's always like one or two essay sections, and then most of it's multiple choice in a lot of these
Mhm.
standardized
Yeah.
tests. And like that's just a really, like, it's not a terrible way to test someone's knowledge of the given subject, but you have to craft those multiple choice questions in a very particular way for it to be effective. It's and a lot of the time it's like if you can pick up on the little clues and the little just like idiosyncrasies of how the test is being written, you can like kind of fake your way through without actually knowing the material.
Yeah.
You can be like, okay, they're asking these kind of answers on both of them, so it's definitely not those two. So you can kind of like do that kind of thing. So if you're like smart enough, you don't even have to learn the material, even though you're probably smart enough to know it on your own. Um,
Mhm.
so when we do this and we engage in this kind of like quantified learning, people that are smart enough to understand it or would be able to go deeper aren't given the opportunity to do so because the class has to be dumbed down for everyone. And so like when they might want to go further or they would be ready for more progress, they have to sit and wait. And so,
Mhm.
you know, what inevitably happens is people that are actually legitimately intelligent drop out because the school system isn't really doing for them what they need it to do, that they can probably do it more efficiently on their own, or if they find, you know, like an actual mentor or somebody that can they can learn from in a one-on-one setting. And then some of the people that just aren't wired to learn in the same ways that most other people are, they end up getting left behind. So, you know, in order to appeal to the mass, the average person, you lose a lot of the people in the end.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
it's like I say all that, and then like I don't place too much blame on like professors and educators today because they're just given a task that is really that's almost impossible.
Mhm.
You know, make these people know things when oftentimes they're not even there to learn, they're just there to get a grade and a degree.
Yeah.
That's like
Yes,
the
definitely.
thing,
Yeah.
yeah, is that, you know, nobody's in college to learn anymore. They're in there to get a job. And so, you know, again, what happens is the lessons get dumbed down and they get just modified in a way that it makes it easier for people to get the grades they need, because in the end it's just a letter on a piece of paper that says that they get this thing that will help them get a job. And so it's like if a professor makes it too difficult, they're like almost stopping people from getting employed. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of like problematic morally. Um, yeah, I don't know. Those are some of my thoughts. I definitely am not a fan of standardized testing as it exists.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I have some stuff to add. But let's hear from Ford and Ruth if you guys have something like to add on your opinions of standardized testing and how it like relates to how it emanates like more of like it makes us more mechanic than human. Like, what do you guys think of that? Do you have any opinions?
I think that it's very dependent on state. Me and Ruth are both in North Carolina, and we don't have a very good state curriculum at all. Everything is kind of all over the place, and the majority of it is just testing for or educating for the test. And a lot of teachers will tell you that too. And I've struggled with dyslexia for a long time, and until about uh, ninth grade that I decided to drop out and go full homeschool. And after I basically got to have my own hands-on form of curriculum, that the only standardized test I have to do is the one at the end of the year that tells me whether or not I get to pass. I've noticed that public schools, at least, are basically just the worst possible way of trying to educate a large amount of people.
Yeah. I actually just finished my first semester exams, and this was the first year that they've done teacher made tests, and they were very odd because none of it was like the normal standard testing where it's like the ABCD thing. It was all like actual hand questions that you had to do, and it was weird, but it was a lot better for a lot of the kids because nobody really enjoys that kind of testing. We all really dread it anymore, and it's just not fun.
Sorry, my thing was like, do you dread the multiple choice kind of testing or the new kind of testing that they were trying out?
Oh, the multiple choice. I have really
Yeah.
bad ADHD, so it's, oh, I don't have to know all this. I just have to guess which number or whatever is on the A, B, or C thing.
Right.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
oh no, go ahead. I can go after you.
I think that the No Child Left Behind Act kind of solidified the standardized testing form of education. And in theory and on paper, it sounds like a good opportunity to help individuals. But overall, it basically has diluted the curriculums down to the point to where everybody is getting more of this, unified content that doesn't necessarily help each individual. And it's basically a dumbed down program that it's allowed for, kids who may not interpret the same information in the same ways to get different interpretations, but it singles out those who can't really fit into either of those criterias. It's like Griffin was saying, everybody has their own educational style. Nobody learns the same. And I think that the No Child Left Behind program has basically counteracted what it was set in place to do.
Interesting. So what do you guys see as the solution to this? Like, since we said that standardized testing kind of unifies and tries to let, like you said, like no child left behind policy, where it's dilute, like you dilute this kind of, you dilute it down to a unified content that doesn't necessarily actually test a person's competence on a certain, like to a certain degree, right? In one way, it's somewhat, it is an indicator, but it's not the whole indicator, right? Because when you put standardized tests, you kind of just narrow the thought process of the person. You kind of just corner him in a way that you want him to think like you and answer like you. What if I feel like there's a different answer, or what if I feel like I just don't, I understand the concept, but the question is just formed in a way that's completely foreign to me. Like, it's not a good way of testing the actual competence on a certain like topic. So what do you guys think is like a solution to kind of like So let's say we take standardized testing like the SAT, for example, in high school to go to university, and then we take like the GRE or the GMAT in after we're done in university to do like I think a grad school. So what do you guys think should be like an alternative way to like test students on their kind of competence like level? I don't know. Like, what do you guys think?
I think definitely
I think it's. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. I was gonna say I think like there are a couple things that need to happen. One being we need to make it so that college degrees aren't so necessary in order to get a
Okay.
job that is like a meaning like a useful income, a livable income. Because that's really the issue is that like you can get a job without a college degree, totally. There are even some pretty good jobs you can get without a college degree, but most people at least have the impression, and it's mostly true, that like to get you know to get all the things that you want out of life, whether it's like a house with the picket fence, or like a
Yep.
just even just a house in general, or food every night, like it's at least to get to a point of like financial security where you don't have to worry day to day. You don't have to live paycheck to paycheck. It's kind of like that. So that shouldn't be required so much, but it's like it's hard because at the root there's this issue of like there's too many people. How do we weed out the people that aren't really cut out for this job, or how do
Mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
figure out who is actually passionate about this and will be able to understand it and will be able to contribute to this project or this position in whatever way. um, so like I think at the core it's like there's too many people, and so as a result, because there's so many people, the standards need to keep getting raised, otherwise you're hiring everyone, and that you can't do that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
like every year there's more and more people applying to these types of positions. And uh, part of that too is that there's more and more people applying to like STEM positions, because that's what is the future now in everyone's eyes, is like STEM programs, and that's what we need to be promoting more. And so the arts are actually losing people, um, and so we get more of a loss of that kind of that mentality in the world, that less rationalized view of um, the world and our experience. But I don't know, it's hard to say, like it really is, I think, on a person to person basis, and it comes down to the question too of like what really is knowledge or intelligence or
Mm-hmm.
competence. Like, can these things even be measured in a quantifiable way? Maybe the
Right.
best way
Right.
is to, yeah, maybe the best way is to, instead of grading person in a based on a test so that you can go to assign a number, because that's why we use SATs and why they're considered so efficient, is because you can assign a number to a person, and then you
Yes.
can look at that number and you don't have to read the exam. You can just know from that number how they did. But it's like, who knows? Maybe it's the person that got I don't remember how SAT scores work anymore, but like maybe the person that got like 2,000 points wrote a pretty crappy essay, and they actually don't have a great grasp on the English language. But then the person that got like 1,500 points, they wrote a really good essay, and they actually are good at engaging and they're good at learning, but they weren't necessarily wired to take that test in that certain way.
Yes.
I have tons
Yes.
of
Yeah.
friends that are like really smart, and they have like one friend of mine that's he's a middle school teacher now, and he's a smart dude. He's just not good at taking tests, and never was in high school, always struggled with it, and his grades suffered in the end because of it. But it was like if he was asked to like create an art project, he's an art teacher, or like write a paper about something like that he's actually passionate about, then he did well. So I guess there's just also this aspect of like, I think part of the function of what makes a person intelligent or competent, or, I guess worthy, if you're going to use that word in the terms of like employment,
Mm-hmm.
is like how good are they at learning? Like not just
Mm-hmm.
what do they know, and like what skills do they have now? How capable are they of learning new skills and of learning new information? That's something that's really almost like we're trying to capture the human experience in a way, which is in itself a difficult task. In the end, it's going to be diluted in some respect. So what's the appropriate level so that we can get an actual gauge of where a person is at? Or is it just, I don't know, maybe it's just wrong to be testing people in the first place. Maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I would say that. I would say maybe it is a bit wrong testing people. I don't know. I just feel like you test them on such a small part of their entire lives. Like I don't know. I just don't like the idea of someone testing me. Like who's what I don't know. I wish post-secondary institutions could be circled not around like two midterms and a final, and that's how you get judged by why you like how you did in the course. That's literally it's judged, like the whole course is judged on exams. Like, and what if someone does not like taking exams? What if someone is not like equipped to like, yeah, so I don't know. I just feel like testing is
That's kind of yeah. That's like kind of why I like philosophy, at least in terms of like as an academic thing, because compared to other fields, it's like I can't remember the last time I've had a test in a philosophy course. It's almost
amazing.
yeah. It's always almost always papers, which is
Yeah.
cool. Like I like to write, so that helps a little bit. But maybe that sounds good for someone that doesn't like to write, but then maybe they probably won't be passionate about philosophy either. But
Yeah.
it's I like that because like when I'm grading things for philosophy courses too, if I can see a student's piece of writing and I can see the way that they talk about a subject, especially when it's like an open-ended thing, and that's
Yeah.
also the case with a lot of the classes that I take, is like the papers, it's not like you're assigned a topic even. It's like, this is what the course is about. These are the things we're going to talk about. Give me 3 papers by the end of the semester. And that's it. That's all the instruction you get. And so you just like write about what interests you, and that provokes people to write better, which is great.
Yeah. Exactly. That's
And then when
awesome.
there's when there's a conversation going on and they have to like kind of engage in the dialogue, that's the best way to assess whether someone knows what's going on. Because if
Yeah.
they don't even, it's not just that they know what to say, but if they know how to talk about it. And it's good because like people can get things wrong, but it's if you can see through their writing that they're trying, or that they like are grasping the material in a certain way that is like, maybe even if it's wrong, it's understandable that they get it wrong because it's like a complicated piece or something like that. And so like I feel like in a lot of philosophy that courses that I've been in, a lot of the grading is based more on I don't want to say merit, but like effort, and less so about getting the right answer.
Amazing. Yeah. I completely agree with that. I like that.
Well, what were you gonna say, Ford?
I really like what y'all were talking about. Is education really is seen as almost a judgment rather than something that's to help you. It's almost like the educational system is designed to put you on trial until you either pass and get your diploma, or fail, and it separates you almost into a caste system that's just designed against you in a way, to where if you don't succeed in these things, then you obviously can still get jobs and you do have the opportunity, but you're worse off than anyone else who would have that achievement of a college degree. And with the like judgment system, it makes things very subjective against you, whenever you should have the subjectivity in your own hands to be able to interpret things in your own way, because it's almost impossible to treat a very massive scale of education on the individual level.
Isn't there someone that says, I don't know who, but I feel there's a quote floating around in my head that's like create like high like education system, like the centralized education system is where creativity goes to die. It's like where all that
Yeah.
subjectivity or that individual thinking patterns that you have that are unique to you, that's where they get like shaved down to everyone else's level. And it's like a conformity type thing. You should think the way that I do. It's
Yeah.
really hard to like I don't know. Yeah, how do you what's the best way to promote like individual thinking or new types of thinking? It's like if someone's really like going down that path of like they're kind of like a pioneer of sorts in uh, the way that they view the world, they shouldn't go to school because they'll lose that.
Yeah, yeah, they lose that exactly. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Actually, I just remembered something. I remember in my one of my high school classes, we read an author that didn't believe in grammar. So it was actually really interesting because he just had his own way of writing, literally with no commas, no periods. He just had this weird way of writing, and I completely fell in love with him because I was like, he's going against the system, and it's funny because he's an author, so he should have like exemplary like grammar, right? Like that's basics, like ABC, like whoever's writing a book, right? He did
Is
not
that
at
the
all.
guy? Is that the guy that put like at the end of his book, he was like, people were complaining that there's no punctuation, so here it is, and he put like 2 or 3 pages of just periods
I
and
think it's him.
question marks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then, like he's like, place them wherever you wish. He doesn't care.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, like, why not? This is his, like, this is his kind of, he wants to like I love that, and I like the example of grammar because I hated when teachers are like, you're supposed to put a semicolon here, a period here. I'm like, I never understood the difference. I mean, I do understand the difference, but I never, it never. What if I don't want to put the? What if I want it to be a run-on sentence? This is how I talk. I feel like if I talk like that, then I will write like that. You know, like don't tell me what to do. I don't know. Especially with grammar, I was really frustrated when I was younger, actually, because they always used to tell me what to do, where to place commas, periods. Uh, uh, if don't put too many exclamation points, and I'm like, what if I want, this is how I want to write, this is how I want to express my feelings, especially with such a creative discipline like that, and you're kind of like cornering me to do one thing, and I want to do another. I just felt like even with like an artistic kind of field, which is like writing, like it's more of like liberal, right? Like, so you feel like you're gonna have the agency and authority to kind of write how you want to. Even there, like I felt just so cornered and elbowed in to like think, do what the standard is and like write how everyone else writes. So I don't know. I just thought that guy, the author, was super kind of, he was not conforming with the herd, and I just felt like he just had a very positive and kind of uh changing aura to his writing, like, which I kind of liked. So yeah.
I um I had a teacher a couple years ago tell me that commas belong after a but in a sentence, not beforehand. And I've always thought of a comma as like a short pause.
What?
And you don't pause after but, you pause at, like, you don't pause after that, you pause before that. So I don't, like,
That's
yeah,
absurd. I haven't heard. I
but
haven't heard
Telling you, the North Carolina educational system works wonders with the kids.
oh yeah, it's great.
It's I don't know. You bring up grammar and like grammar and language is always interesting to me because like I guess the purpose of like setting these grammatical rules is so that we can increase the clarity of our speech because language is such an inefficient way of transmitting information between each other that like that's how I think of language. It's a tool that we use in order for me to put a thought that's in my
Yeah,
head into your head.
yours.
And I try my best to do that. And if, I guess I've always been told that like, um, if mastering the English language is basically mastering the ability to clarify your thoughts as much as possible so that you can do that transference in the best way. So if we, so like grammar is like, here are these set of rules that we can all agree on so that we can all communicate in the same way so that we can send information to each other as efficiently as possible. But I guess, what we don't realize is what's lost in that is that when you're forming your thoughts in a certain way, in order to align with everyone else's so that they can even understand what you're saying, it's lost in translation, literally. Like that's the term. And like it's and makes me think of about how just the fundamental things that in the English speaking world that we, at least like those that speak English as a primary language, we don't often think about how our language shapes the way that we think, and that the English language is a very didactic and analytic and particular language, and also a very confusing one because it just has all these smorgasbord of rules that it kind of puts wherever it feels like. But then, like, languages like Japanese or Korean, they're based in pictograms a lot of time. They're based in like, and the way that they think about the world is reflected in the way that they speak. That's why direct translation between those two languages are so hard, because like, when people in Japan are saying like, I don't have a good example, but like, the direct translations are more metaphorical, it's more experiential, it's more of like a feeling, and like saying like this feeling applied to this scenario, where we kind of have words that we assign to objects and to emotions in the world. But our emotional language is uh, pretty weak, I think, in comparison to some others. We're very much like object and space oriented, I think, and time oriented, just in the way that we
Yeah.
talk, and tenses and things like that. Other languages don't have tenses. Like that's just a funny thing to think about. Like that we think about time in a very linear fashion. I think partially due to the way that we speak, at least in those that speak English as a primary language, that like it that influences that linear thinking. But then if you spoke a language that didn't have tenses, you wouldn't think of time as such a linear thing. You
Yeah.
would think
Yeah.
as more
Mhm.
unified, like how it
Mhm.
actually is. So yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, I think so. Those frustrations that we have with grammar and things like that, um, I think are indications of, the English language trying to cordon off and section something off and analyze something in a particular scientific way, for the purpose of increasing clarity.
Yeah.
But what do you
Yeah.
lose? Yeah.
Awesome. So does anyone have anything to say before we move on to the next question? So I'll just gonna read a small snippet and then we're gonna ask another question so we can discuss. So should we continue?
Anything else to talk about?
Sorry, the voice got cut out. What did you say, Ford?
I said there's not much more that I know of that we could add.
Yeah, so I think it's a pretty good answer to the question of what are your opinions on standardized testing. I knew it was a conversation was kind of gonna flow more, so I'm glad I asked that. So there are gonna be like some other things and key concepts to go over, and then we're gonna ask another question moving forward. So, moreover, Dewey was passionately vouched against those who believed that information taught at education houses was it at its final and last form, and that further interpretation and modification was uncalled for. So basically, he was against the fact that what we know about like anything like physics, what we know about chemistry, was its kind of last form, and that form was the one that's going to be taught and it cannot be interpreted further. So he believed, like contrary to popular belief, Dewey believed that any piece of information could be challenged and modified further and further, and that the rigidness and need for information to perpetuate as it is was hindering the minds of individuals. So the fact that these individuals were told that this information that they are receiving is kind of the latest, most relevant, kind of non-changing fact that we should kind of take as is, was kind of stunting their creativity and their need to kind of maybe debunk or find another way or another answer for that solution. Because if someone tells you like this is it and there's no other way, your creativity is kind of lost, and your ability to kind of grow your mind and expand your kind of paradigms and lenses is lost as well. So he completely was against the fact that uh, that information that was taught was it at its final and last form. So we go on to his key concepts. So individuals learn and grow as a result of experiences and interactions with the world. These interactions and experiences lead individuals to continually develop new concepts, ideas, and practices. That said, have you ever met a concept that you've learned when you were a kid, didn't resonate with much with, But when you've grown older, due to garnering a myriad of experiences, can make a tight correlation between that said concept and your experience. That is why do we believe that education should be predicated on an integrated approach where they kind of, you do teach the subject matter, but also you use the emotion and interests of that student to kind of mesh that with that the subject matter and make it more interesting to the students. So my question for you guys is, do you think that everything learned in a classroom has to tie into what we ultimately know from experience? Put differently, for us to retain the information proclaimed in a school setting and actually understand and digest it, do we need that abundance of experience and interaction with the world for the said information to stick? Because if it is in fact necessary, then being taught potent concepts at such a young age is completely void and will go to vain, because I myself would love to relearn everything I learned in elementary school again, because now I have enough experience to actually understand what is being said instead of just passively computing it. So in my opinion, the things that I learned in even in high, like elementary, middle and high school, I would love to relearn now, because I've just been through so much, travel to so many places, met so many different people, worked so many different jobs. I would just love to relearn so many of the concepts I learned when I was in lower, middle, and high school, because I feel like now I've garnered so much more information and experience that can kind of help me correlate with different concepts I learn at school. So do you guys think it is relevant that you garner as much experience as you can to be able to retain the information you get from school, or do you guys not think there's a correlation there at all? Or if there is a correlation, is it strong or weak? So that's my question.
I think the experience gained through like necessity is a lot different than experience gained through intent. Like if you're very intently focused on a topic or a subject or something that you just want to invest into, you will definitely learn a whole lot better about that topic than you would if it's something that you have to do. And that's one debate that I see circulating around education a lot, is just the fact that kids are forced into it.
Yeah.
And it's that scenario that gives these kids the mentality of, I don't want to be here and I don't want to do this. And when you tack on everything about school work and everything about school life, it just sucks. You have to get up really early in the morning, go to a place you don't want to be, listen to things you don't want to listen to. And of course, these kids aren't going to learn anything. But whenever you do have a singularity between the kids that allows them to connect independently to the topics and subjects that they want to learn, and you take away the necessity when the diploma that you get after you graduate high school is just a secondary object to you, it really helps to focus on what you need and want to learn.
Yeah.
With school, they tell you that it's a whole lot like a job, having to wake up super early, staying awake, doing all this paperwork and all this. But the second I got my first job, I loved working more than I ever liked being at school.
Because you were actually like doing something that felt like you were contributing to your own like well-being, or were you doing something that you actually enjoyed? Is that why you were enjoying it more?
Yeah, I just enjoyed the mindless, stupid motions of everything without actually having to think about it. I never actually had to wake up early. I always had the late shifts and stuff, and it wasn't hard and it wasn't difficult, I guess, if that makes any sense. But I really enjoyed just doing something that wasn't difficult after years of thinking it was going to be difficult.
Yeah, it's true. We're like primed to like dread the concept of work at all, right? Like that being a job is just part of being an adult. That's terrible. All the cartoons and shows and media that we're subject to as kids like presents work as like the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny because like I think that's a reflection of the tech society at large too, that it presents work as something that's negative because the whole system is wired to seek efficiency, and
Yeah.
efficiency like less input, more output.
Yeah.
Work is bad, but getting more out of it with putting less effort in is great. Um, so yeah, we want to we're driven to hate work, just inherently. But then it's also presented as this thing, as Ford said, that we have to do, that like you don't get to participate in this society or this world unless you uh, work. Um, but it's like, is that really what human beings were meant to do? Um,
Mm.
it really shouldn't be, there's labor involved, sure, with being a being with like existing in the world. You got to get food and shelter, and if you're going to form a group with other people, with other beings, a little society, if you will, then yeah, you got to do things to contribute to that society. But it's become so abstracted now, especially with all the people that there are, that not only do we dread the concept of labor or effort because we live in a world that tries to minimize that, but also oftentimes the things that we can find to do, or the jobs that we do find, don't really feel fulfilling because we're not seeing that direct connection between like our effort and like the increased well-being of us and those around us. We're most of the time just getting a paycheck so that we can uh, give that paycheck back to the system and say, can I have food please? And
Exactly.
yeah, and it's sad.
And anytime like you said, it's shown in cartoons and media and stuff that going to work is such an awful thing. But like once you see somebody doing something that they actually like to do, they're shown as like this hippie who doesn't have any
Yeah.
money or any housing or anything like that. And it I would love to live like that, but I mean that's
Right.
just me.
I feel like we're kind of slowly moving in that direction a little bit. I feel like the hippie lifestyle and that mentality is kind of being favored a little bit more in popular culture. I think I've been
The
seeing it a little.
70s are coming back.
Yeah, exactly. The 70s are coming back, and I welcome them. But as long as but we uh, it's good to have that kind of mentality as long as we're keeping focused on what the real issues are, and one of which being the technology that we use to try to make our lives better. Well, so there's that too. More people are becoming hippies, but then those same people are also really excited for the new iPhone to come out because it's going to make them share their hippie lives more effectively with those around us. I don't know.
Yeah. They
So
gotta
it's like,
show off their like new hippie clothes to TikTok or whatever.
yep. Look at how cool
It's
I
nothing
am.
enjoyable.
Hula hooping with my goats and um but yeah, so experience before education kind of thing, or in tandem with, what I immediately think of is oh shoot, it says you guys can still hear me? It says my connection was unstable. um
We heard until after like the iPhone part, I think.
oh, okay. um yeah. Oh, yeah. So I was just gonna say, on what you were talking about, Nyla, with like, does experience come before education
Yeah.
kind of thing? Yeah. What I think of is in Plato's Republic when he's laying out like the best kind of education system
Mhm.
that you can make in order to build a society with luxuries. This is a big, by the way, if if any of you guys have read Plato's Republic or you haven't yet, there's the most important key point is at the very beginning of the book when they ask Socrates, what is like the best society? What is like the best world? And it's like, and he says, oh, like small scale community, you like grow your own, you get your own resources and you
Mhm. Mhm.
live minimally, and you don't try to mess with anyone else's lives, but you live communally at the same time, and like you just
Mhm.
kind of like are happy, you just enjoy existing. And then the Glaucon replies like, oh, but I want like like pork and like nice wine and stuff like that. And Socrates is like, oh, okay, if you want all that nice stuff, then this is what you got to do. And then it goes on through the rest of the book of like the republic that needs to be constructed. But it's all
Ah,
predicated on like, if you want a society with luxury, if you want basically a non-sustainable society,
oh,
this is the best one that you could have. But given that caveat, he says like the best kind of education system is one where like the first, I think like 10 to 13 years of a child's life, no school, like they just
yeah, yeah,
exist. They're just children.
exist.
They go and
Yeah.
have fun. They explore the world,
Mhm.
and they figure things out on their own, and they learn about all these things before they learn them in an academic setting, and
Yes.
apply words and phrases and concepts to them. Learn mathematics and things like that. Math comes way later. We don't need to be teaching third graders like multiplication.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
we don't need it.
Why?
It's not gonna help them. Like,
Why?
teach them that later after they have fully grasped the concept of numbers, I guess, through experience.
Yes. To
And like
experience.
I think
Yes.
Alan Watts says this thing about like there's this weird paradox going on where like kids learn about things before they experience them. So
Yeah.
they have all of these preconceived notions about what this thing is, but they've never seen it. I think the example that he uses is like an elephant. Like they learn what an elephant is, but then they experience one, and it's like they learn so much. Yeah, to kind of answer your question, I guess, like experience, I think should come first. I think
Hmm.
that you need to have a foundation, a real world foundation, not a book foundation for your interactions with the world. Because yeah, otherwise you're gonna interact with the world thinking that you know a bunch of stuff and then realizing that you really don't. And then no one even told you that there was so much more that there was to learn just by seeing and experiencing the thing that you've talked about for so long. So yeah.
So I have a follow-up question
Can I
for you,
add?
Christian, and then yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead Ford, and then I'll talk after you.
So I have a very personal account with that kind of idea. My mom studied criminal psychology for a long time, and she went through a college program so that she could be a cop. And she loved all the investigation discovery channels and all these like crime channels and stuff. And me and her would just sit down and watch this stuff all day. And I really enjoyed criminal psychology, and it got me very interested in subjects like that. And there was a lot of things that I didn't really understand because I didn't know how to yet. And then a couple years later, I realized that if it weren't for my mom basically forcing me to enjoy criminal psychology with her and watch these crime shows, I would have never found any of Kaczynski's writings. I would have never found any interest in them. And ultimately, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys today. There's a lot of things that I've seen kind of line up with those like preconceived notions that kids have just from the exposures that they get whenever they're young, and then how they can change as soon as you have a real experience that you can connect things to. And a lot of the problems with the educational system today are rooted directly to that. It's just this overexposure at a young age and this misunderstanding of how the world is going to be and how the world works.
Yeah, totally. Like that's a perfect story, perfect example of what I was thinking too. Yeah. But I don't know if you know you're still muted, Nyla. Or you?
Oh yeah, okay. I didn't realize I was muted. Okay, so yeah, I had a question for you guys also. It's like a follow-up question. So what do you guys think then would be the best approach for to assure, since we established that it's the best way is probably for children to garner experience before learning concepts, right? So what do you guys think would be a reform to the system to do that? Like, what would kids, if like we want that to happen, like we want them to experience and then learn. So what would kids be doing from the ages of 0 to 10 to 14 in like an industrial, like technological society? Like nowadays, if we wanted to make the system that way, what do you think they'd be doing? Like the issue is if you actually mandate that, then the kids will just be staying home on their phones, on their devices, right? They're not going to be like outside exploring, because in our society, like in our like this day and age, like no one does that anymore. But maybe during, of course, like the time of play, that would have made sense. But do you think that makes sense now? Like, what do you guys think of that? I don't know how well it will apply, like with the kids nowadays.
That's a really good question, because like I want to say that, you know, for that first 10 years they shouldn't be in school. You know, like they don't need to be getting indoctrinated that early. We don't need to be leveling their brains out that early when they're still developing. We should give them a chance to flourish in the real world before we put on a layer of artificiality. But you know, again, that's like an idealistic situation. That's like thinking of if we were able to start from square one, and start from society from the ground up, kind of. But that's not the case. We're in a technological society right now, and yeah, that's not viable, especially given just raw population. That many kids staying at home, well, that means that there's that many parents that can't go to work, or that like will have more trouble getting money to pay for sitters, or like something like that. I don't know, maybe you could like reform preschool and early education so that it's like less of an education system and more of just kind of like a daycare.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like the children are taken care of. The adults can go to their jobs and do what they need to do to survive in this society, and so we're not putting an extra burden on them in that way. I hate saying that because like children are a burden to their parents, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, they could just be like a daycare, and they go on trips to like the local forests every week. They like
That would be awesome. That would be
learn
good.
things about their community and
Yeah.
about the world around them, and not in a didactic way, in an experiential way. We're not going to sit in the classroom and tell you what X, Y, and Z is. We're going to go check out X, Y, and Z.
Yes, exactly. Like for example, if we want to like test like the law of like gravity, I don't know, like do it, throw an apple, like go to an apple ranch and like start playing around with stuff and make sure kids understand that concept. So kind of like for electricity, like go outside. I don't know, like there's so many different ways that school can be not in a classroom. Like we're learning so many abstract concepts when we were younger in a classroom setting. Like I, for one, I'm a very visual learner. Like I love seeing things in front of me and correlating them with what I saw. Like I love using my senses, like especially my like sound and sight and touch. Like I like learning that way. So I feel like a lot of kids are also like that, but because we're so like since since we were young, like we were taught like from the get-go like certain like physics and like chemistry concepts, or certain like even like history concepts. Like these things can be taught in a different way. Like it doesn't necessarily need to be always in a classroom. Like it's only like maybe once a month where we go out and we just maybe learn one like concept from nature. Like for example, like we're learning about flowers and bees, and yeah, we go outside and we see them. But I'm sure there are certain ways that teachers can make more like not a completely hands off approach, but like John Dewey said, like more of like an integrated approach where it's this and that, like a bit of classroom learning, but also a lot of outside learning. Like I feel like experience is super. I think it's essential for you to tie in correlations with what you're learning about the subject matter. Like I feel like that's really important. And like you said, Griffin, I completely agree with the fact that children like up to the age of 10, 11 should just not be in school. Like why are we indoctrinating them that early? Like why are we teaching them math that early? On the contrary, I feel like I would have been loved. I would have loved someone teaching me math only 2 years ago. Like 20 at 20, that would be great. I because now like I don't think I should be taught like at like I don't know. I just feel like my mind, I want when it's at like peak to be taught these concepts. I don't want it to be taught like, especially if you have a bad teacher, or you're since I just have very bad experience with math because I had really bad teachers, and I wasn't our class was pretty competitive, so a lot of the kids were super smart in math, so it made me feel like I'm a failure at math, even though I was like average student at math. So all this makes a difference whenever you're younger. It sticks. Like I remember every bad experience I had on a math test, every bad experience I had whenever I get anxious. I still get anxious when I see numbers, even though I'm an accounting major. I still get anxious when I see numbers. I don't like them. I sometimes, like, yeah, they bother me because when I was young, I had this like traumatic experience of teachers making me stay after school and solving extra problems and doing that, and reinforce, like, positive reinforcement, where when I used to get good grades, they used to do like give me grapes, and I don't know what was going on, but like it was very weird. So whenever I think of math, even when I was an adult, like like now, a lot of experiences from when I was younger kind of creep up, and I don't think I would want that for anyone, like any kid, to go through and feel like just this berated by like a subject or by people. Like I was, especially math. Math was terrible. It was my arch nemesis. So I like, for kids, like I don't think they should be learning it at a young age, regardless of how good they might be at it. Like I think it should just be like pushed off. Like everything should be pushed off quite a bit. Like, yeah.
I think that the world that you guys are describing, I mean, it sounds awesome, and to have that leverage between youth and like maturity, between you and the exposures that you have, it sounds great. But the more that you read into it in like a technocratic way, it has a lot of similarity to like the first two chapters of Brave New World, where there was one part where they were touring the school grounds, and it was just a bunch of kids that were free to do whatever. And it explains how the first years of a child's life at that point were basically designed for them to get the most attainment as they possibly could, and then they're shot into, like, slingshotted into this industrial world where everything else is designed for them. And that little bit of leverage that they got when they were young basically set them on this path of attainment, that they want to kind of regain that nostalgic value that they had when they were young. And so in an industrial world, it's another thing that's just a reform against restoration. You can't really divide it into those two examples and it set it on its own path. I think that it's kind of scary to think about that anything that we could do to help an educational system would ultimately either be used against itself in the future or cause more issues down the line.
I agree with Ford, and to agree also with what Griffin said about school basically being a daycare. I feel like that was the original concept of introducing school to younger children. Was, yes, we have a place for children to go that is free and paid for by the state. Let's put all of our kids in here at a very early age and let them learn by them, or let them learn from these teachers who basically know very little to almost nothing about what they're actually teaching.
Yeah, you guys make a really good point about like for Ford especially, about like we don't want to be, our goal here is not to like reform the system, I guess. In the end, like the technological system, its existence itself is what's causing the issues. And so if we just try to like, give kids a 10-year reprieve and then jump them in, I don't know, maybe that would be even more harmful in a way. But in the end, we don't want them to have to be indoctrinated at all. That life should be a daycare, so to speak. That
Yeah.
we shouldn't be forced to formulate our thinking in any way. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to answer the question of like, we know where we want to get to, but how do we get there from where we are right now? and you know, and it's easy to answer that with like, we just blow it all up, man. It's like, okay, what does that look like? What do you mean? What do we blow up first? Is there a way to do this stepwise to minimize harm, or do we just like have to do it all at once and accept the harm that comes? I don't know, but you know, we're
Like the debate you were talking about between the Socratic world of ease and a good life compared to luxury, except backwards. And I think that that's where the struggle is how do we go backwards, and what would happen if we did go backwards. And you really can reduce it to just about any industrial topic, and education fits perfectly because it's the root of the industrialized living. We learn these ways through education and schooling, and it's on this scale with this kind of technique put into it, it's almost impossible to reverse engineer back to that Socratic world where everything would be okay.
Yeah, totally. It seems almost impossible, but it's like, if we just keep going down, as we all know, if we keep going down this path, it's definitely going to be terrible.
Yeah.
So what's the right thing to do? But I think at least talking about these things and questioning what the right thing to do is an important first step that is really not being taken by most people right now. Most people don't even want to talk about it. So that's what we're doing.
Awesome. So there was just this last point where we can kind of wrap up with, since I think it's time. But if you guys don't mind, we can just answer that question quickly. So one of the two key concept that Dewey, the second one actually. So do we believe that learning begins with a student's emotional response, which yields to further inquiry? That said, the best way to trigger that emotional response through in Dewey's like lens is through an aesthetic experience. So do you think that educators, instead of feeding students information like a robot and expecting these students to feed it back to them in an exam setting, is actually learning, or is learning tied to a more innate chord within us that is triggered by a myriad of ways, one of them being aesthetically? So which yields better results, the former or the latter? So do you guys think that because I guess in a way children or in general societies or people like to kind of relinquish their power to a higher authority because they just feel like it's easier, right? Like we all in one way or another wanted to be spoon fed in a way because we didn't want to think much. We don't want to think. We just want to like kind of relinquish our power, even though we say we want power, but it's just way easier to just let someone like a higher power kind of tell you what to do. So do you think that which one yields better results? The forest, because some people would argue that that teacher who's kind of rigid, firm, and tells students exactly what to say and what to do, the kids end up getting good and yes, we said like scores aren't a good indicator of like whether a person knows a thing or not, and we questioned what knowledge actually is, but like speaking like in general. So what do you guys think will actually yield better results as like now we're speaking like test scores, like of someone kind of feeding students information or making them kind of be connected with like an aesthetic experience, trigger their emotions, kind of what do you think would reflect better on standardized testing, and what do you think would reflect better on like kind of like actually retaining knowledge? Like yeah, I know it's an obvious like answer, but I just want to see how like you guys think in a way like which is better for in general our goal as ATC, right? Like what do we want, so we can kind of get like that.
Definitely, like the aesthetic path, so to speak, is more impactful and it sticks with people more. I don't remember any of the analytic didactic crap that was fed to me
Yeah.
in high school. Most of it I don't remember. But the things I do remember were those that were laden with emotion and actually connected to my personal experience in my life. So in a way, yeah, again, tailoring the teaching method to the individual and to their experience is the best way for them to retain the information, for sure. maybe it is in some way not as effective as the other way,
Yeah.
in terms of getting the correct answers on a test. But again, we said I don't think testing is really the best way to judge whether a person is knowledgeable on the subject or not. I had like multiple choice quizzes occasionally in this course I just took, and like I got a bunch of things wrong occasionally. I knew the things, I just like was like overreading or like
Yeah,
overthinking the
overthinking.
question.
Yeah,
And
you're overthinking the question.
yeah, totally. I
I
was
do that.
looking at it for too long, and I'm like, oh, is it false now? I don't know. And like, and they were just simple true false questions too. It wasn't even multiple choice. But
Yeah.
you know, still it's not fully reflective, especially when you get down to just two answers. It's like yes or
Yeah,
no. It's like,
yes or no.
well, nothing
I'm the type of
exists as a
person. Yeah,
dualism.
yeah. I'm the type of person also who like, especially multiple choice or true or false. So, oh, I overthink the crap out of the question for some reason. I'm always like, but this could work because, and then I start making like cases. I start justifying everything. I'm like, okay, no, okay. And even though like none of them could be like, not only like two of them are usually the options, but I just feel like I want to justify all of them for some reason. I want to test whether I can like defend or kind of debunk something. So I just kind of overthink it, and they don't want that. They just want a robot who kind of is just knows the answer. But I would just like to dig deeper, always like be like, where I can see where they're coming from here, but I also see where they're coming from there, but I also see where they're coming. So multiple choice does not work well with me because I'm just the type of person who likes to defend every answer for some reason. Like I just like
Yeah.
to find A, B, C, and D and defend them all and see which one I defended it the best. And that's where I pick it. So it actually depends on me. Like the answer is how well I defend the one I picked.
Yeah.
So
Or
it's actually
if they just asked you to like write out your response, they would get a much better grasp
yes,
on what you were actually thinking and
yes.
your process of learning and where you're
Yeah.
at.
Actually,
Yeah.
it's funny. Every multiple choice exam I did, I circled my question, and then I write like a big ass like paragraph next to the question explaining why I picked that one, even though it's not required. But I want to go the extra mile so they understand that I actually want to learn here. I'm just not here for
Yeah.
a degree. Like what accounting student like writes essays on exams? I always do that. I always would like to write why I believe I chose this answer. So this is just how I view my learning. It's not just that I like, because I want to let them know, like, even though it's a wrong answer, I completely like thought of it in such a deep way that I want to justify why I picked that one. So
Mhm.
so it's sad just to see how, I don't know, just it just it upsets me when someone studies and knows the material and they're just tested on the scale of like true false multiple choice. Like I mean, like, why I don't find that there to be a reason for that. Like, and yeah, back to like the fact that questions will even be tested, like that's another conversation maybe for later. Like we should maybe talk about like, should there be tests, shouldn't there? If there are no tests, how do you kind of be like, oh yeah, this person was good again? Like, who's to say he's a good student, he's not a good student? So again, like, there's
Mhm.
so many questions that unfold other questions that unfold other questions. So yeah, I guess kind of goes in a loop. But yeah, Ford and Ruth, do you guys have any like closing remarks, and what you want to answer the question, or what do you guys think?
I think that just having the ability to be critical of why you're learning and what you're learning is very useful on an individual level. I mean, all kids nowadays question, why am I in school? This sucks. But you can look a lot deeper into it and kind of build your own path through your education. That's kind of the way that I did it. And that really helped me go onto the path that I'm on now. And that, like, the ability to not only judge yourself, but judge why you're learning and what you're learning kind of counteracts the judgment that's imposed upon you by the educational system. Whenever you have the ability to defend yourself, like you were saying, you put your own subjectivity into it, and it kind of allows you to structure your own path. But on a mass scale, it's so limited, and that option is very minimal on the individual scale. You can't do much with it. I think back to when I was doing my psychology program, and my teacher, we had like a very personal connection between one another. We would talk about just having normal conversations about things that, related to the psychology program. And that helped to build a lot of trust in what I was learning. Whenever we had our final exams for that class, he gave me a piece of paper, and the only question on it was some messed up, garbled math sounding question like, Sally has 3 tomatoes and 2 watermelons and her train's leaving Austin, Texas at 90 miles an hour. Why are you still reading this question? You know you passed. And I thought that was the funniest thing. And it just kind of helped me to solidify my own idea of what education should be. It's that just tiny characteristic of a personal response to what you're learning and why that really helps to build an educational system.
And I feel like education shouldn't be just thrown at you. I feel like you should be able to choose what you go into from the start, not just, yes, here's a bunch of core classes that you're going to need in the future, but here's some extra stuff that you might get to do or like later on in your life, but probably won't be able to anyways because you are stupid school child, and I feel like the best way to eradicate testing altogether should just be not having a lot of competition in the testing world, because behind the scenes at the school places and stuff, a lot of the higher ups are like, we should have better testing scores, so we should dumb it down for more children so that way we can have better scores and we can be the best school ever.
Totally, I concur.
Awesome. I think that this conversation actually went pretty well, to be completely honest. We got a lot of good, like I write down a lot of notes, so I think I got like something out from everyone. So this was awesome.